This is the part where Christian tells a funny joke. Hello and welcome back to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. I'm Christian, a photographer.
And I'm Ben, an animator.
So, you went somewhere recently that was, as far as I could tell, a great time.
And it was a great time, Christian. Like we've been advertising on the podcast, I was able to go to Ground Zero's groundbreaking pop-up. And I gotta say, it was probably the most fun I have ever had at any art convention ever.
And what's really cool to see is that some of the people we've had on this podcast were tabling there. Napoleon Chavez was tabling there on episode 7, and another friend of ours was there who hasn't come out on the podcast yet, but he is, so stay tuned for that in episode 18.
Yeah, and there were so many other incredible artists there, and it was so great to hear the support for the podcast, as well as for the upcoming events that Ground Zero has going on. So hopefully we will be able to partner with Eva, as in Christian and I, on this podcast to be promoting Ground Zero's big expo that's coming up in June.
That's right, Eva. You just got called out. Also, really cool news. There's a show happening right now that was created by one of your hosts. And it's not me. This is Christian talking, by the way.
Thanks for the shout out, Christian. Yeah, Gear and Gadget, like we've promoted probably way too much on this podcast, is out on Toon Therapy's YouTube channel. And that's really what I wanted to say about it is people at the event were like, oh yeah, I've seen you done Gear and Gadget, but where is it? I can't find it on your YouTube channel. And I go, well, because it's on Toon Therapy's YouTube channel.
Toon Therapy is a group of fellow students and artists who are trying to make content and just, boost their careers and just have fun and let other people have fun with the content they're making.
And you won't see it on my channel, so make sure you go over to Toon Therapy Animation on YouTube or at Toon Therapy on Instagram. And while you're there, follow and subscribe.
Speaking of animation, our guest today, Tony Sun. Man, what a cool dude. He has done so much. He's an animator, a fine artist, he's an editor, and a 3D compositor. Dang it, freaking fuck. He's an animator, a fine artist? Is that what it's called? And he's an editor and 3D compositor.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we were able to get Tony on the podcast to talk about his phenomenal work, but also to talk about the struggle that you and I think all artists feel about their work.
One of the things we talk about on this podcast is imposter syndrome. It's something that Kaya Herman and Hannah Patrico both mentioned. It's something that we, the hosts, have felt. The hosts, why am I suddenly giving ourselves a title? Right there, that was it. That was imposter syndrome.
Oh.
I think as artists, we all feel like we're kind of faking it. And, you can say that you are, but so is everybody else. We're all faking it because we're just doing something that we love.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so glad we were able to do in this episode. We dug a little bit deeper and a little more personal than we have in the past about artist struggles. So, super grateful for Tony's time, for his openness that he provided us in this conversation. And if you or any other artists you know out there have doubted life, your life in art, hear from all of us that you're not alone, that you have friends who care about you, and we're in this together for the long haul.
And so, to bring you a little bit of reality and a little bit of encouragement, here's Tony Sun. Hi, and welcome back to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. I'm Christian, a videographer.
And I'm Ben, an animator.
Ben, I have done a lot of things.
Really?
No. But we have someone sitting here who has done a lot of things.
You're right, Christian. Our guest on tonight is an animator, editor, painter, and, this is where I first heard his name, and winner of the worldwide 24-hour animation competition in 2015.
Wow, that's incredible.
And he is Tony Sun.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Wow, when you lay it out like that, I should really pad out my resume more.
What I was gonna say at the beginning of this podcast, which I told you right before we started recording, was I was thinking back to the first time that we met. And it was my first semester at Cal State Fullerton. I was going to PMC meetings, which is the Pencil Mileage Club for those listening, and they were having a film festival for the end of the year. And so the person that you had to go through to get your film into the festival was you. And so that's how we met, and thankfully my film got in. So yeah, it was nice.
That was your first year?
Well, I was a transfer student.
I am old.
Before we get on to talking about your time at Fullerton, because I do want to get into that, Tony, first I want to ask you, what first got you inspired to get into art?
Well, the 90s were filled with a lot of video games and toys and cartoons, and that was just like a good time for me to like just soak that all up. In elementary school, I was just doing Mario fan art and playing Mario Party 1, 2, and 3 nonstop, and Pokemon, and all that good stuff. The cartoons, the games, the glorified toy commercials.
Were there ones in particular that got you interested in animation, or was it just in general Mario and Pokemon and stuff?
It was sort of a passing interest, because I think I wouldn't say from the age of 0 to 18 I had any idea what I wanted to do. I actually didn't take any actual art classes in high school, so I really had no idea how to draw. I just made weird like pixel art and 3D and stuff like that. Just there was also the days of Newgrounds.
Oh, yeah. So you are young.
So yeah, watching a lot of Flash movies and trying to make Flash stuff myself with pirated copies of Flash MX.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. And what was your early content back then?
Bad Splinter Cell fanfic and
I mean, that was a lot of people got famous from those kinds of fanfics, though, and just the parodies and things like that.
oh yeah, like in high school, Ego Raptor was like our hero even before he got really, really big.
Yeah.
Even before he did like Game Grumps stuff. I don't think like YouTube was even a thing back then, so
Yeah. This is predating YouTube, people listening to this. If you can't remember that time, then
We're glad you're here to listen to this. That's awesome, man. So you were doing that, and then, Ego Raptor, an influence there, but were there other influences? Like, what guided you kind of to Fullerton is what I'm getting to.
it's a rough road in my life as we're trying to get to Fullerton, because I went from high school to community college because I definitely didn't have the grades for just like transferring to a 4-year university. Not that I had like any idea what I would be doing at a 4-year university, so it was pretty nice. In community college back in Long Beach, I would take like very basic art classes, beginning painting, beginning drawing, doing charcoal and drawing just like the plastic spheres and the plastic boxes up on the table with the lamp on it, and just 30 students surrounded, just not knowing what to do with charcoal. And, but it provided me a lot of good experience to know what the creative process is like. And eventually, a couple years into community college, I got the credits to look for a university. Weirdly enough, I emailed Cal State Long Beach, which now runs the 24-hour animation contest. They didn't have an animation program at the time, or I think the person I emailed had no idea they had an animation program.
Probably was there, and Aubrey's shaking his fist over there. Yeah.
So the next person I emailed was Chuck Grebe, Charles Grebe. His face is like plastered on the front of the art program website in Cal State Fullerton. So I just emailed him directly, and in Chuck Grebe fashion, replies in like 5 minutes. I'm not even sure classes were on at that time, but sure. Like, and the next day I drove out 30 miles. That's how far I was commuting to Cal State Fullerton every day.
Oh my gosh.
To just see like one of his animation classes in progress, and decision made. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
Do you remember what class he was teaching at that time?
Yeah, it was one of his production classes where you learn storyboarding and writing and just looking at examples of animated short films to make. And surprisingly enough, like a lot of people I met that day, I went on to become friends with when I got into the school. And I continued to be friends with them to this day.
That's awesome, man. Okay, it's time for some shout outs. Who were they?
One of them is, I'm not sure how to spell his name now, but Kenny Weingart was one of the students in his class.
Shout out!
And he was someone I worked alongside with later during like an animation internship. He already graduated by the time I was starting to do internships at school, so it was fun seeing him out in the professional world. And
was that at Titmouse?
yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So then, not to take it back too far, but I did have a quick question because you didn't know what you wanted to do in high school. And then in community college, did you just start taking art on a whim, or were you already kind of guided there because you started with Flash?
I was kind of guided there. And then there was a lot of fighting with my parents during those community college days of them not really getting why I wanted to do art, and I should be going into a more like safer path for myself. And for a while I just told them I'm doing something with computers, but I'm actually just majoring in art, and they're seeing me like lug art supplies to and from school. And they're like absolutely baffled. So long con, like the degree comes in the mail and says art on it. No, they eventually like warmed up once I stuck to a major and then transferred over to Cal State Fullerton.
I think there's a lot of parents who are afraid of that, but I think it's nice to hear from you, and we've heard from some other people too whose parents at first didn't agree with them, that they usually come around and they see like, oh, you really care about it, so like don't give up. little side PSA there.
Yeah. Well, and Tony, I mean, you're a good example of that. When I got to Cal State Fullerton, which by that time, and we'll talk about this, you had been there for some time, you were like one of the leading officers of one of the biggest clubs on the campus and the biggest art club on the campus. So I think that's awesome, man.
Thanks. I think one of the things I really learned, because that was literally the last year I was there. I didn't do anything PMC related before then. But that last year really like taught me how to engage with a community, and we'll go into this much later, but even after like post-school rejections and being bogged down in the whole job hunting, engaging with a community and making friends and staying connected with friends is something like I enjoy just as much, if not more, than the process of creating art itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. So then you got to Cal State Fullerton in what year?
2011, I think. Took me a good 5 years rather than 4 year thing, but I think that's starting to become the norm because I see friends overloading themselves throughout the semester, and I wish there was an easier way for us to like slow our roll But with each semester being several thousands of dollars worth of like debt or loans or what have you getting racked up, it's hard to not slow down for some people, and it's heartbreaking.
Definitely. You had done like classes in community college, trying out a bunch of different things with art. So what kind of, and also animation. So what kind of got you doing the kinds of things that you're doing now, like animation, editing, painting?
I think a lot of it is exploring areas that I haven't traversed that came about from finding out what I'm definitely not good at. I think it's fairly honest to say that I'm not like technically like or fundamentally proficient in certain aspects of art. Like you can see when you're in like a life drawing class, someone struggling with shading like a leg, right? Someone has already painted the face, the body, the background, and then got the lighting right and everything, and has the finished piece in less than an hour. And that's not to say that's anyone's fault, but it did help to acknowledge what I am good at and trying to figure out what directions I should take that actually do complement me, and not trying to be that person next to me, even though it's really good to develop a competitive spirit and have ambitions when you see a very talented person next to you. Rather than jealousy or self-hatred, you turn to self-motivation. For me, it was self-motivation to explore more aspects of the field, rather than trying to pigeonhole myself in something that was clearly going to take a lot more effort than it might be worth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, seriously, because everyone's good at just naturally different things. And I think that's good and cool that in school you're able to find things that work for you. And then, I mean, I was that same person in life drawing. Like, I was always the worst.
And the thing is, like, this revelation didn't come to me throughout my entire time at school. These were revelations that came about almost towards the end. By the time I'm out the door, I'm getting these revelations about what I should be doing with my life and where I should be going with art. And by then, I'm already out the door, and I'm supposed to be looking for jobs and getting my life started and all these other expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lesson for a lot of people. I mean, you know, especially when you're in school, you're told, like, unless you have a good professor, you're told, you know, oh, reach for the moon, you can do whatever you want if you put your mind to it, yada, yada. But really, it's super important to recognize your limitations. Because when you recognize those limitations, then you can work through them, or you can find what does work and work through that to achieve at least something that you enjoy, versus, oh, I want to be this thing that I'm clearly never going to be good at. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people don't want to talk about because it's hard to face that reality. So thank you for talking about it.
Yeah. I realized that, like, after several years being out of school, hopping in between jobs, taking a bunch of different like little commissions here and there, or trying to start little art projects here and there, trying to find what works, and I'm still trying to find what works right now. Yeah, we can move on. Sorry.
No, that's really good. And that's what I actually wanted to talk about, is because we talked about this a little bit before the podcast. Some of those skills sometimes I think for everybody, but particularly since we're talking about you tonight, are in other ways than just what we see in like the visual arts. For example, you organized that whole film festival that I was talking about that we met at. Essentially, you had to get all the films, get everyone together, make sure it was working, and then halfway through, I think you even had to fix it while it was broken or something like that. And that was all you, and that's skills that I certainly didn't have, but that you had and had developed at community college and even through Fullerton. So that's awesome, man.
I wouldn't say that I was like the sole person that was responsible for that, but it was definitely some of the busier parts, like rendering that entire film festival and getting it onto a flash drive and going through multiple laptops and having like a panic cry in the middle of the film festival because laptops like broke on themselves, or I find out that the laptop the school gave us did not efficiently run 1080p videos at like a good frame rate and just other awful things.
Yeah, but you handled it well until that turned into a really good time. In fact, I brought Christian with me. He wasn't at the school at the time, so he was there too, and both of us were super impressed at that whole thing. And what I'm getting to with all that is you worked on some major films that year, so not only the film festival, but you worked on some pretty big stuff. And the first one I want to talk about, like I mentioned at the beginning, was the Potty Squad film.
Victoria. I think it's Victoria or Megan that like... Yeah, Potty Squad.
So can you explain what that is and what the 24-hour is for people who might not know?
Okay, so once a year, Aubrey Mintz, a professor over at Cal State University Long Beach, hosts a 24-hour contest for students to just jump right in, grab 4 other friends, and try to make a film in 24 hours out of like whatever prompt they make. Our year was like a very kind of simple one, but I think those prompts got more elaborate as it went on. I think the 2018 prompt was like a whole paragraph that I could not read, but a lot of my friends tried their best to like adhere to that prompt. But yeah, grab 4 other friends into a 5-man team and just try to make a film in 24 hours after Aubrey over a YouTube live stream like announces the prompt right then and there and then starts the timer. And what typically happens is the first couple hours are people planning it out, and then just everyone gets into their pajamas, grabs all the, like their snacks and obscene amounts of caffeine drinks and just goes to town on whatever computer they're on, just trying to make a nice, well-produced 30-second film in 24 hours. And 30 seconds... Was it 30 seconds or 60?
I think it was 30. The film had to be 30 seconds long.
Okay, so yeah, making a 30-second film and trying to win at like a worldwide stage is kind of a daunting task for a bunch of animation students. Whether you're in Cal State Fullerton or whether you're up at Ringling or Cal Arts.
Mm-hmm. And Sheridan. This is school in Australia, right?
Yeah. The scope of this animation contest has grown exponentially since 2015. Was it 2015 that I attended that, or?
I think it was, because I was there at that time.
Okay, so yeah, so the 3 years since then, the scope of it has increased, and there are even like some high schools entering those contests, and some of them place pretty high. But yeah, our team was crazy and wanted to do stop motion. Mm-hmm. So the rules for a stop motion film was you can't have stuff made beforehand. You gotta make stuff on the spot there.
Oh, jeez.
That goes the same for people wanting to make their stuff in 3D in Maya or Blender or whatever program they have. So anyone wanting to do that kind of medium had a lot of extra work on their hands. Luckily, our team composition was pretty weird because it was the four of us and one dude who was just like their roommate or friend who was just there for more support or something. So when you see like photos of Potty Squad and stuff, it's just the four of us because the fifth guy was just like a roommate or something.
He was a formality, basically.
Yeah, we needed a 5-man team just because the four of us we were already officers in, the Pencil Mileage Club.
It was you, Victoria,
Ari, and Megan.
Shout out.
Victoria Gould, who works at DreamWorks, and Megan LeMagere and Ari Castleton, who both work at Nickelodeon now.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And the four of us kind of each took a very specific role. They knew that I was pretty handy with video editing and post-production, so my step was like the last step. Megan was very into fabrication at the time, so she and Victoria fabricated like the puppets and the set and what stop motion animators call like the hot box, I think is what they call it. Like you see those Leica sets where it's like a hot lamp and all the puppets there. Mm-hmm. Ari, who was already doing internship at the time, I think. Yeah, he was already on track to being like pretty good with storyboarding, so we just handed that role to him. And Victoria, who was just like very good with organizing stuff, so naturally she fit there.
And now she's organizing, this is just a quick aside, the Fast and Furious show from Netflix, I think.
Has she told people about that?
I'll cut it out if she hasn't.
Yeah, we kind of like found our roles, and I did not sleep the night before because I normally did not sleep at all the entire school semester. So Victoria cut out a chunk of time for me to take a nap. And then when it came time to video edit, which was at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning when they finished principal photography for the stop motion stuff, then I could jump in right after waking up from my nap and get to all the post-production. And we submitted the film on time, and then all four of us were at our internships when the grand prize winner was announced. So all of us are silently screaming while we're over here trying to be good, quiet interns at our animation studio.
That's so awesome. I didn't even know that.
Nobody was at the school, like, because the announcement is made over a live stream inside a school classroom. Mm-hmm. No one was at the school.
Yeah. So, did you hear it secondhand then? Did other people tell you won?
All four of us found out secondhand, just like silently screaming into our group chat. Like,
you guys just had too much skill. You couldn't even stick around. You had to be helping out other studios. It's crazy. And one thing I want to say, the post-production on that was pretty heavy because if I remember correctly, you guys had dialogue, and that dialogue had to be matched because I think it was 2D, and you guys put it onto the character?
Yeah. So another thing Ari did was just draw out all the mouth shapes and just lip-synced all of that to the dialogue. So what he gave me was a file of just a mouth flapping in time with the dialogue in the film, and then I composited that onto our puppet, which had no mouth. So what you're seeing in the film is is the puppet with like his mouth like talking in time with the dialogue, but it's in post-production. It's a 2D element placed onto film footage.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I was going to say about that is, for those listening, the prompt was something like, if a caveman got technology or something like that, right? Or...
Yeah, something like that. So everyone was doing caveman this, caveman that, and we were the only stop motion people, I think. Maybe there was one other, but we were the crazy ones. So.
Mm-hmm. And it really showed. I mean, you guys won a worldwide competition from that film. So if anyone is listening right now and they're interested in watching it, where can they go to see it?
You would find it at the video is called 24 Hours Caveman Channel Potty Squad, and the YouTube channel is called Potty Squad because you couldn't put your real name or the school you were from in the YouTube channel because you submitted a YouTube link rather than a video file over to whoever was judging the competition. So it remains today Potty Squad without any of our names on it until after the fact.
That's awesome, man. And they do that so that the judges won't be biased, basically, right?
Right. And the judges are well-known people in the industry. I think the person judging for our competition, well, one of them, there was like 4 or 5 judges, but one of them was Steve Hickner, who directed Prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
Oh, that's heavy.
and he's come to the school, Cal State Fullerton, like once a year or something like that, or once every couple of years.
Right. But as a judge of the 24-hour animation contest for a couple of years, I don't think he does it anymore, but he does not remember anything about the competitions because I think he does have to go through a good couple hundred submissions, and after that point I can't imagine your brain not melting.
Yeah.
So we just go like, hey, good job giving us high points. He's like, sure, I did that, whatever.
Yeah.
I directed Prince of Egypt, you know.
Yeah. But we
That's
can't
awesome.
forget his work on the B movie.
He worked on the B movie?
He did, but we'll save that. Maybe I'll cut that out.
It's still really cool, though, that you guys had that opportunity to have your stuff seen by industry professionals. It's, like, super cool.
Yeah.
And that makes me want to get into now the other film you were doing, I think at the same time, which was Finishing Touches.
Yeah, this one I did not have as direct a role on it. The film Finishing Touches is directed by Jennifer Pan and Sarah Weaver.
Shut up!
Jesus, give me a heart attack. Sorry, keep going, Tony.
I'm sure you can find them and contact them. Maybe they'd love to talk about their film more because it really was like their baby, like the two of them making that film. It's a 10-minute long 3D animated film, and they needed an assistant editor to just edit so many of those shots together. I think there's a good couple hundred shots in that film, all from different angles and of different complexity. They also needed a little bit of compositing. What I mean by that is to save time on rendering, and it's the longest part of making like 3D animated footage. They would just render one frame of the background if it was a still background, but separately render frames of the characters independent of their background so that it cuts time for each computer rendering frames. And if you're counting 24 frames a second for a 10-minute film, that's a lot of frames.
Yeah.
So I helped stitch all that together somewhat. Jennifer, who is a powerhouse, did a lot more of the editing herself, in addition to directing She did a lot of the rendering herself. She went through making 2 versions of the film. One that was just made by students for the Make a Short Film class that was offered there, which is grab 10 or 15 other students and just make a film, which is more of an exercise in people management rather
than making a film.
Important skills, but yeah, that's crazy.
You'd have just a lot of people at different places in their education deciding to take this short film class and kind of knowing what they're getting into and not knowing what they're getting into. And, so the second version is one entirely touched up by her and Sarah after the fact, completely reanimated in certain spots. I think edited almost completely on her own. I think I did a little more, a little bit of editing on the second version.
It was over the summer, right? Or something like that?
Yeah. This was after I graduated, by the way. So, and that second version is the one you'll find when you look up Finishing Touches by Jennifer Pam and Sarah Weaver, which has gone on to do like some film festival circuits here and there. Won a couple of awards too. So, like, very good on them. And it was fun to be on that project, even as like sort of an assistant editor / compositor / whatever happened on that film.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think it shows the skills that you have. Like, you almost have too many. It's like, which is great, because then people can like place you in where they need you, and you can work really well. So that's awesome.
I do want to add that halfway through the second version of the film being made, I did have to drop out of helping out on that film because I think, like, I was in the middle of like a very bad bout of like depression. Because in the middle of trying to do that film, I was also applying to as many jobs as I can and getting into that cycle of getting rejections or not hearing back, seeing friends succeed when you don't, and internalizing all that. And it's very real that it can get in the way of your own ability to produce art effectively. When people say like art is made out of strife, I have to like just really disagree with that, because you make nothing when you are depressed and sulking and crying under your table or not getting out of bed for the entire day, and that eventually led to me like just not helping to the same capacity I did during the first version of the film. So, and it left a sour note for me, but I'm happy to hear that even after dropping out of that, seeing the film succeed was very like refreshing and relieving to hear, like, because I think I internalized a lot of doubt and believing that certain things were my fault, or believing that I was like untalented, or that my depression led to like people hating me or something. It's all just a lot of stuff I had to work through on my own that I think was not very good if I was trying to like make a film at the same time as dealing with all that. And I'm on good terms with them. This isn't like some kind of revelation or anything like that.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people go through, especially in the art community, go through that kind of... It's really hard when you spend your whole life chasing after something, and when you're a student, you're always like in the future, but then you get kind of spat out at the end of that machine, and now you're kind of left on your own, wandering through life, trying to find a job. Like, it can get very depressing. And I know I've gone through that myself, as I was a film major who dropped out of film school. And so I went to photography, which is why I'll often say I'm either a film guy or I'm a photography guy, because I've done a little bit of both. But finding jobs is hard. And to this day, the jobs I've had in video specifically have always been hard. And so I think that it's important to be aware of these things. And I would ask you, when you're talking to somebody who's going through a similar hardship as that, what kind of advice do you have for them based on your own experience?
Well, in my opinion, like, I think seeking actual professional help really, like, help with that. I know that's not an option for everyone, and it took me a very long time to even get to a point where I could, like, find someone to talk to that had a degree in that kind of stuff. Because therapy, medication, all that stuff is expensive. And I don't blame anyone who can't access those kinds of resources. But if you're in school, you do have a little bit of a resource in, like, student health center and stuff like that. I hear they have some behavioral health stuff over there. So, yeah, outside of that, when I didn't have a job, I could apply for ACA and Medi-Cal because I was flat broke, had no income, lived with my parents, so I have health care, kind of. So that helped me start finding some professional help for that. And I didn't find that stuff out till just last year, probably. So this is still something, like, new to me that I'm still going through now.
Oh, that's good, man.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. We're well aware that this is very difficult stuff to talk about. And thank you for your bravery coming on here and being willing to open that up to people and say, hey, it's okay if you need help.
Yeah. There's still a lot of self-doubt in whether or not, like, I am, like, depressed enough to say that I'm depressed, or whether, or, like, someone else has it worse than me, so I shouldn't be seeking help, or something like that. But yeah, I had to push past that. Yeah.
Oh,
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. In almost any other field, the expectation is that you learn a little bit, but then someone is going to teach you as you go. Whereas in art, it's almost this expectation that you already have to be good at what you do before you even start the job, which is so different than almost any other field that you're going to find in a college, at least in my experience. And so I think that it's very easy to be full of self-doubt, to be full of, sort of beating yourself up with, why didn't I spend more time doing this or that? Because, there's so much expected of you right as you step out of the college exit door, and I just think that's ridiculous, personally.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like you have very high expectations when you're in school. And for some people, it's very it's very motivating, and for some other people it's the complete opposite, and it's different for everyone. But that doesn't apply when it comes to like the education system. It's like it works for some people, it doesn't work for others, and that's just like the unfortunate thing about it. But it does get better. Yeah.
What I think is cool for me to hear personally is just kind of like art where you've got so many different styles all throughout history, so many different movements, and each one has its own value. But if you're comparing it on the value that you think another one is valuable, then you say, oh, well, this one doesn't hold up. But that's not only is that a limited view, but it's also not a real view. And I think that's what's cool, and what I want to tell you and want to tell everybody who's listening is, as artists, but also as people, you have value, a lot of value, and your work is good. It doesn't matter what level you're at or what level you want to be at in the future. What you're doing right now and where you're at is exactly where you're meant to be. I believe that. But that doesn't make it easier when you're going up against people who have one feeling or another about your art. And so what I'm getting to with all of that is, before and at school, you had done painting, which is fantastic. I love all the paintings you've done. I was showing Christian right before the podcast on Instagram. But beyond, after school, I would say, you've gone into a new style that you've done in your sketchbook. And we talked about this a little bit last time we hung out at one of Jake's sketch nights. Shout out, Jake.
Shout out.
Could you talk about, like, and I'm assuming it's mostly in your sketchbook, but like those kind of paintings with like watercolor?
Yeah. I just went out to buy like one of those travel-sized watercolor palettes and a small sketchbook, and just decided to do something different. And I think if you're stuck in a rut, that's something you should maybe consider as doing something a little outside of the norm. Like I don't have a lot of experience in watercolor. I didn't take any watercolor class in school or in community college, or in university or any of that levels. Like I just kind of winged it. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and when I feel ready, I think I'll look into like more advanced techniques. But for now, I just love pulling out the sketchbook and just, I don't know, making a tree or painting a bush or something like that.
In cafe sketching?
Yeah. Just doing whatever. So recently, like, I used to think like animate, but for now, I have some fun just doodling, making quick little watercolor paintings here and there. I might move up to gouache or acrylic, or like if you follow, I think the account's called Warrior Painters.
Shout out.
Which is like a group of artists who just like organize little trips out into parks or wherever, and just break out like plein air kits and just start painting outdoors and stuff. And I really like that. Never done it myself, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you have taken your painting around. I mean, we were both at the packing house in Anaheim, I think, when you were doing paintings last that I was there.
Yeah. And I would occasionally try to challenge myself, but most of the time I just wanted to make something to make something. So just draw the back of someone's head, or just draw like a ketchup bottle in front of you or whatever. It's try to break away from the expectation of just trying to get better, to reach this level that you have to reach by this date or whatever. So for right now, it's just kind of doing my own thing.
That's awesome, man.
That's super cool. And do you think it's valuable then for people who have left school to like almost continue their own education by pushing themselves, trying new things?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of my friends, they go to those like classes at Nomin or CGMA or Brainstorm, places that offer classes to take after your education to sharpen your skills. Seeing them continue their education after school is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that's what was cool for me to see, to kind of shout you out when we were drawing together with a couple friends from school. Just seeing a style that I hadn't seen from you before, and but seeing all those skills that you'd been building all along the way, from all the way back through all your time at Cal State Fullerton into the future. It's got a beautiful simplicity that I absolutely love. And it's almost got, and this is how I'll turn it into a question. I know it's you and your kind of natural drawing, but it almost has like a, maybe, I don't want to say Japanese, but like kind of an influence of like Eastern painting.
A little bit, but yeah, it's mostly just me kind of like freestyling it. It's more inspired by even though it's a completely different medium, just watching hours upon hours of Bob Ross videos and just
Yes.
Shout out to Bob Ross.
Yes.
let's get crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about compiling the first couple of paintings I have into a small little zine that I'm just gonna print out on cheap Xerox paper and cheaply staple together and just hand out sometime in the future. Wanting to make something out of that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And I think the title that I wanted to give the zine was I don't know how to paint in watercolor, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Awesome.
But I also know nothing about watercolor, so one thing I wanted to ask before I move on is, for the black lines, are you using watercolor with a brush to do that, or is it a pen, or how are you doing that?
Oh yeah, it's just a brush pen with some India ink in it. You know, you can head over to like any art supply place and get like a Pentel black ink brush pen. Just those things like really lay down like a nice stroke, as if it's like you're doing it with like a paintbrush or something. They're really good for like also inking in like large swaths of black space when you're doing like comics and stuff.
Oh, that's super cool that you're taking all the skills that you've learned and making them into something new even now after school. That's super awesome. So, one thing that we forgot to talk about that I didn't talk about, I actually have it on my paper, it's right there, but is Tony's amazing films. So, can you talk about the films that you yourself made?
Well, I guess after college, I just kind of wanted to make stuff on my own. So I went ahead and started making like little short films of ideas I've had in my head since college, but never went through with. And I thought, why not? And just I've made 2 of them so far about this like dystopian robot universe it's basically Terminator fanfic, but like, you know, make what you love. So and coincidentally both of them were like made in like a week or less of just like rushed drawings and stuff, because those films I wanted to make sort of with a lot of restrictions on myself. Wasn't good at animating, so find ways around that, and just using like little editing tricks here and there to convey what I wanted in the story, despite not having like the time to draw out a lot of frames or draw stuff on model or something. They're films I wanted to make without any kind of like just expectation of myself to make anything like super polished or anything like that.
Oh, but those films are great. Like, and I really like the kind of gritty texture that you gave to the drawings. Like, is that just like a brush in Photoshop or?
Yeah. So if you look up Mecha, Meka by Tony Sun on YouTube or something, I'm sure you'll find one or both of them, and both of them feature me just taking a really big it was like a dry, gritty or spongy brush in Photoshop and working with that because I really like how natural it looks, and just kind of making stuff out of that. Everything looks like it's been painted on or made out of crayon or something like that, and like just letting myself go and not caring about really clean line work or anything like that.
And I think what's so interesting about that style with the content of your films is that it's about, without spoiling too much, it's a world where kind of robots are sort of on top. And it's interesting that you use these kind of very gritty, natural feeling things with that concept because it gives it that feeling of humanity that perhaps the robots are trying to stamp out. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to use that kind of rough look because I think I wanted to illustrate more so some proficiency in After Effects and editing more so than my animating in those films, and I want to continue doing more of that as I think or brainstorm about like the possibility of doing like a third film in that series.
When that third film does come out, where can people go to watch it?
You can find it at instagram.com/TonySunArtAnim. Art anim as in art and animation, so it's TonySonArtanim. And I've heard it's the screen name I use publicly for when I'm looking for work, so when I hear people try to parse that out, I've realized I've made a mistake, but I'm gonna roll with it. I've heard everything from Tony Zonartnanim to like Tony's Sonartnanim. Like, yeah. But I'm gonna roll with it.
That's awesome. I know. Well, I just made the Instagram for the Up and Coming Artist podcast one word, and no one can read it.
There is also youtube.com/TonySunArtAnim and newgrounds.com/TonySunArtAnim.
Newgrounds, make a comeback!
It's a good website. There's a lot of weird stuff on it, but there's an artist community there. If you dig around for it.
So we've heard a lot about the art that you've done. We've heard a lot about the art that you're doing. I would genuinely like to know, where would you like to take your art? Like, what's the ideal next 5 years look like for you?
I definitely want to improve in painting somehow. I definitely want to buy more materials and experiment with that. I haven't touched gouache ever, so that's going to be something new that I want to do in the future. I want to get back into animating stuff, and I have a little bit here and there the past couple years, and want to try to do that more regularly. And lately I've been hitting up some internet friends and making some art for them on the side. I've been trying to make my own animated films here and there. They're less animation, more like just glorified animatics, but they're still something. There's still stories that I want to put on screen. So I want to make a little bit of that, and even start tabling at zine fests or conventions. So that zine that I said I was gonna make, I'm gonna have to actually make that someday. So, so yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I think I want to get some time to heal, because I think for the past couple years I've really hurt myself. Maybe not in the physical sense, but in every other way.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for sharing where you are and where you hope to be. We really appreciate having you on here.
Thank you.
And I think, oh man, this was months ago. I don't even know if you remember this. This was probably almost a year ago. We were talking, I think it was after, speaking of the film festivals, the most recent film festival that PMC did, which was after you had graduated. It was my last year there. And I think, if I remember correctly, I had wanted to get you on the podcast even back then, because I love your work. And
you've been approaching me about this podcast thing for many years, and I have repeatedly ghosted you on that.
Well, thanks for coming, man. We really appreciate it. And for all the artists out there who are in the struggle right now, I think it's good to be able to hear about what you're going through and what you're doing to get better.
Yeah, we're not alone. We have a community of people who are always willing to listen to you, to bring you up.
I can definitely say that friends are the reason I'm in a good place right now. It was a friend of mine who helped me get a part-time job at places. It was a friend who helped me get the necessary paperwork together for seeking professional help, and it's friends to this day who encourage me to explore my own path in art or in life. If art was not a thing I have in life, then at least I still have friends.
That's awesome, man.
And thank you for becoming our friend.
Yeah. Thank you for the coffee.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.